Shalom, everyone, and yeah, we've arrived here at this is actually maybe my favorite Torah portion, just for a couple of verses. It's definitely in the top 5 or 6, I think. But before I get there, I just received the news that IDF soldier, actually a United States citizen, who was held hostage for these at the moment, I think 157 days, they found that he is dead. No other details coming in yet, but just makes me wonder how many of these hostages have already been killed. Are there any that are alive? I guess that we're just going to have to wait and see on a day-by-day basis. But as far as the American and I guess the other news medias, but specifically in America, the hostages are kind of a non-issue these days. We see America doing such stupid things as putting in a maritime pier in Gaza. This is just going to allow for other weapons. To think that this is actually going to be a good thing, I just cannot see that. That Israel would be able to inspect this, probably not. The politics of everything is going to supersede that. To have American troops that close to the border could bring us into this a little bit more. There's just nothing. I mean, you could send the whole world in supplies to Gaza, but until you eliminate those that are stealing everything, then you're really not doing. This is futile. My thanks to Bill and Kimberly, Battlefield Assembly of Messiah, was able to go over this past weekend, spend time with Josh Waller and his wife Caitlin. Their 3 little girls, really cute. But it was an amazing time just getting to work with Josh. To see Josh, I don't get to spend as much time with him as I'd like. One of the things he brought out, and I find this so amazing, people ask, what's going on spiritually in Israel? Well, that is a subject all to itself, because there's a lot going on in the land right now from a spiritual aspect. But I guess a couple of the greatest news items regarding that would be the cases now of zitziot that are being ordered for the soldiers. But beyond that one there's a patch now that's available for the IDF, and there's 2 patches. One of them is a patch regarding the Third Temple, the rebuilding of the Third Temple. The other patch it simply says Mashiach. Now, anyone who cannot see the spiritual significance of IDF soldiers that are requesting these patches, I don't have anything to say really on that. But for you and I to see that these soldiers are looking not only to the rebuilding of the temple, but also to Messiah coming. I mean, that in itself should show us, should remind us of the days that we are in. All right, the Torah portion this week is it's accounts. Now, the word account here is a pretty interesting word, and it also is translated many times in Scripture as visitation. So this is, let's say it like this: this is the visitation of the tabernacle. How do we deal with that? Well, let's just consider in our own lives. Maybe you've gone through a move to one place to another, as Kathy and I have done many times, as we did here to Franklin. It was 8 years ago now that we were in this transition into this area. And what did we do first? Well, before we just packed up the truck and moved to Beverly there, we visited. We took a couple of times, 2 or 3 times. We came out here, we looked around, and we visited this area before we actually decided to, this is actually what we're going to do. We're going to be moving. And so the tabernacle is kind of like the Almighty says, well, I'm going to visit you for a while, and I'm going to be in your midst until such time as I make the final move. Now, where is that final move? You go over to Revelation chapter 21. I saw a renewed heaven, a renewed earth. The former things had passed away. And it is the time in which that which is in the heavenly realm will not just be visiting earth, but will be established on earth once and for all, permanently. And it says in Isaiah chapter 66 regarding this, that we will come before him from one Rosh Chodesh, new moon, to another, one Shabbat to another, to worship him. His presence upon this earth will no longer just be a visitation. It will be a permanence. But there's an interesting verse over in the book of Luke. In Luke chapter 19, this is the time right after what's called the triumphal entry of Yeshua into the city of Jerusalem. And of course, he's dealing with the scribes, the Pharisees, the religious leaders of that day. And he says to them, let's see, I'll go back to verse 44, let's see, verse 43. For the days are coming upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you, encircle you, hem you in on every side, and dash you to the ground, you and your children within your walls, leaving not one stone standing on another. And of course, this is speaking of that day regarding the Romans coming and the siege over Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple. My question, I guess, has to be asked, though the question itself sends chills, I think, should send chills up and down our spine. Has this prophecy of Yeshua been fulfilled, or will it again be fulfilled at some point? We're just going to have to wait and see that one. But the next verse says, and all because you did not recognize your opportunity when Elohim offered it. The word there in King James is, you did not recognize the time of your visitation, which goes along with the tabernacle. How many people walking in the wilderness would see the tabernacle, the Mishkan, in their midst and not understand the message that was there? Now, we can point fingers all day to them, I guess. But how many today? We need to ask ourselves a question. Am I realizing, am I embracing the time of the visitation? It appears from everything that I can see that the words of the Psalms, arise, O Yah, or it is time for you to act, because the people are not obeying your Torah. It is time for you to act, O Yah. Are we living in that day? Are we living in a day in which we're driven by politics, by news cycles, or are we driven by the Word? Driven by the Word in such a way that we're looking at the news cycles, at the politics, at all of these things and saying, this is the visitation of the Almighty. This is His preparation for the day in which He will move in permanently. The rest of it goes from there in Exodus on through the rest of chapter 38 into chapter 39, and is the summary, a very kind of a nutshell summary of what was used, the amount of gold, of silver, of all of these different things, what was used in the tabernacle, a summary of the work that was done, who was doing it, all of those things. So every single piece of the tabernacle has meaning. But then it comes to the end in which they have done all that they can do. Okay, it's kind of like if you've ever built a model, or as my grandmother did of sewing a piece of clothing, or maybe you quilted or something like that. You start out with a pattern. I remember my grandmother on my father's side. She was in Jacksonville, was known as one of the best seamstresses that there were. And people would come from all over Jacksonville, all over the west side of Jacksonville, to have my grandmother make dresses for them. They'd come in and she'd have this pattern. And you look at a pattern and you're like, okay, well, there's a picture on the front, but I can't really quite figure out what this is going to look like in the end. But she would begin to lay that pattern out and take this material, and then she would sew it, and then would have the finished product laying there. But at that point, it was just a finished product. It might be hanging up on a hanger on the door or in a closet somewhere. She would then make a phone call and tell the lady that had come over and talked with her about this, your dress is ready. And so the lady would come and she would check the measurements on everything and see if it needed to be taken in a little bit or maybe let out in some places. Would check the length of the skirt, all of those things. But it was the same process of taking something from a blueprint and then the manifestation of that is there, but at the moment it doesn't have all the life in it. And so we read about this kind of in the same manner, is that Moshe had received a blueprint from, and we read about that in Hebrews chapter 8. I really urge you as we go through this Torah portion to go to Hebrews chapter 8 and just spend some time pondering those words of taking that blueprint, that model of I guess we could say the actual that's in that heavenly realm, and then bringing it into our realm, and doing that by a pattern. It's kind of like with that pattern with my grandmother. What would happen? I guess that someone somewhere along the way would have put together a dress, sewn it, and then take it apart, and then make that pattern for it. So that's kind of the same thing that the Almighty has done. Moshe and those that are working on this, they do everything they can as far as putting it all together, but it's just there. There's life, but it's not the complete life, and we'll read about that more in just a moment. But the wording here is it says in verse 42, the people of Israel did all the work just as Yehovah had ordered Moshe. Moshe saw the work, and there it was. They had done it. That is one of the reasons. This is one of my favorite Torah portions. They saw the work. They had done it. All that Moshe had commanded them to do, from the offering to the work, everything, they had done it. The Hebrews in the wilderness, growing up, both in a early age in a Baptist church. I remember then in my days in Nazarene, Assembly of God, various places, that it seemed that the Hebrews in the wilderness, Jews as a whole, let's face it, are kind of like the punching bag. It's something you can take out your frustration on. And it bothered me even then, and does much more today, to look at the people in the wilderness and judge them. Why would someone judge it? Because if we can judge their mistakes, it makes us feel better about ourselves. I mean, consider a couple of weeks ago the account of the golden calf. There will be people, and there are people, Sunday after Sunday, I could say Shabbat after Shabbat, that will stand in judgment of the Hebrews in the wilderness with their golden calf while they're preparing for Easter, Halloween, Valentine. We got a church here in Franklin that, they don't miss a holiday for anything. They put on their billboard that be a jack-o'-lantern, shine your light into the world. Not too long ago, it was Jesus, the first Valentine. I mean, they don't miss, but probably withstand week after week in judgment of those who created a golden calf while they're standing there in their own golden calf. Let's not be too quick to judge. And look at the accomplishment that these people did in that day. That they did it everything. It says exactly, not kind of like, but exactly as Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had ordered, they had done it. Could he look at us today? Could he look at our lives, our homes, our congregations, our services, what we're doing today, and say, there's a people right there. There's a couple, a family, and they're doing to the best of their human fallen ability. They're doing it. They're doing what I have commanded them. And because of that, he responded. Now, the word here is interesting. It says that they had done it. It's that they had brought life into it. They had brought life, and the word there is asah. So it's the same word as we see back in Genesis, that when the Almighty brings the coats, the garments of to Adam and Eve, their covering, it says he brought life into them. How that is, I'm not exactly sure, but he brought a measure of life into that covering. So it wasn't just a coat you put on. There was something of an essence there. And so they had done the same thing. In fact, it goes, I guess the best way to describe it is this. It says that they brought asah, aleph tav. Now, what is the aleph tav? The aleph tav, in my opinion, is a marker of the Messiah. It is a sign. When we see the aleph tav through Scripture, and it's all over, in fact, going back to Genesis chapter 1, all the way over to Revelation, when Yeshua is standing there before Yochanan on the Isle of Patmos, and he says, I am the aleph tav. And this is where most translations totally miss it. The King James, I am the Alpha and the Omega. A Hebrew Messiah, a Jewish Messiah, would not have been speaking Greek from the heavenly realm to a Hebrew on the Isle of Patmos. That's just beyond comprehension that would have happened. David Stern missed it when he translated, I'm the beginning and the end. No, he says, I am the Aleph and the Tav, which is a marker in Scripture pointing us to the Messiah. So they had asah, Aleph Tav. They had brought life into the instructions that Moshe had given to them that had come from Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh himself. Are we doing the same thing today with our teaching? As we're expounding upon the Torah, as we're expounding upon His Word, how are we doing that? Is it just black letters on white pages? Is it just, instruction? As Paul would say, is it just the letter of the law? I challenged you last week regarding Passover. As you're getting ready for your Passover, is it just going to be, once again, the same Siddur, void of Messiah, just a story from centuries ago? I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. I'm just asking the question. Is it going to be just the letter of somebody, or is our Passover going to be filled with Messiah? Regarding this time, if you didn't get a chance to listen, Josh brought out in one of his, I think the first message he did, the words of Isaiah, "Arise, shine, because your light has come," Isaiah chapter 60. The glory of Jerusalem, of Israel, excuse me, is coming upon this earth. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks, I guess. It's like that was the ninth plague. Here we are coming up on Passover. And this would have been the time frame of that ninth plague, the plague of darkness over all the world. But in Goshen there was light. Is that what we're seeing today? Is that what we're experiencing today? That ninth plague before the revelation of Messiah is revealed through the Lamb? Is that what we're seeing? That the world is going to become darker and darker, while Israel becomes lighter and lighter. I can tell you, with soldiers putting on a patch about the third temple and the word Mashiach, I mean, that's light, folks. You can't get much lighter than speaking about Messiah and a temple. But yet, how many will just study darkness? I mean, talk about darkness. I mean, think about this: in the United States, the eclipse, which will darken, go over all of these towns called Nineveh. It will bring darkness just before Passover. Just things that make you go, in life. But for those that are looking toward the horizon, are we going to become the ones that are seeing light and are drawn to that light? Or just remain studying darkness? They did exactly what Moshe asked them to do. They brought life into the blueprint, the substance out of the blueprint. And because of that, through that, it says that he blessed them. Now, many believe that this is Psalm 90. I won't read the whole psalm. Let you, if you'd like to, you can go and read that psalm. And it's interesting. It's kind of a very, very much a parallel to some of the words of what I call the foreigner's prayer toward the end of Isaiah 50. Right in there from 58, 59, 60, right in there. The foreigner's prayer is about, you have, we held your temple for just such a short amount of time, and return for the sake of your tribes. And that's the same thing that Moshe, even as he's blessing the people, is prophesying to the people of the things that are going to happen to them. The struggles, the downfalls, the things they're going to go through. I've been reading through the book of Judges. I mean, and they did right for a few days, and then they did what was evil. And then they got to the end of what was evil, and they cried out, and the Father, because he's gracious, he answered them, and he restored them, and then they did evil again. And it's just this roller coaster ride of, cannot someone just make this through for more than one generation? But yet, it's the pattern that we see through generations. I think we're not on the uptick on this one. We're probably on the downfall. But even in the midst of that, there needs to be people that set a standard. So he blessed them, and in the blessing he was real with them. He was truthful with them. The greatest blessing that someone can give you is the truth. If all you're surrounded by is, Ken dolls, yes men, yes in Hebrew is Ken, all right. So if all you're surrounding yourself with is people that are going to tell you how wonderful you are, but never tell you that there's some corrections that need to be made. You become like the king that had no clothes. You're naked and you don't realize it. Now, going on, it says, on the first day of the first month, you were to set up the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, put in the ark of the testimony, and conceal the ark with the curtain. So this is not, these words are not all totally chronological every time. Okay, it'll go in and explain something and then give it a time frame of when that was to happen or that did happen. So don't get tied up in, well, it says that they'd already done this and then it said no. But here it is, and it is the first day of the first month. You're to set up the tent of meeting. The tent of meeting was on the anniversary of them leaving from the land of Egypt. To think back over the last year of what has happened in the lives of the Hebrews. I mean, they've seen from this moment, they've seen the final plague. They've slaughtered the animal, the lamb, put the blood on the doorpost. They were given all the wealth. They were taken to the Red Sea. They saw the Pharaoh and his armies killed, drowned in the Red Sea. They've gone to Marah. They've been feasting on manna on a daily basis. They've been drinking the water from a rock of Mount Sinai. They went to Sinai, going through the golden calf, all of those things. I mean, you think back over our year, our last year. What has happened in this year? I guess top on the list for me would be October 7th. And the atrocities of that. It seems so surreal. I told Kathy last night that we're almost at 180 days, 6 months. I mean, think about that. The number of that have been killed, those that have been wounded is in the thousands. We've seen the anti-Semitism come forth. We've experienced the tragedies of soldiers being killed. But for us, I mean, October 7th may seem like a long time ago. But out of the 133 hostages, if there are any that are alive, there are some of those, if they are alive today, that have not seen the sun in almost 6 months. I cannot imagine that. I mean, living in Alaska, as Kathy and I did, we would go through the winters. Cabin fever was a reality. You get to about January, February, and you're seeing in Anchorage about 4 hours or so of sunshine every day. And addictions were through the roof, depression, because we are created for light. Yes, there must be that time of darkness for rest, but we are created as beings that need light. There is nutrition that you receive in vitamin D from the sun, but it's not just it's not just the vitamins. It's the mentality, the morale, the feeling of well-being. If you've ever go up to Seattle and you can go for days and days, you see light, yes, but you don't see the sun. I know people that 4 or 5 cloudy days and they're like, put me in bed and just leave me alone. Because we're created as beings that need light. Am I speaking of the natural light or the spiritual light of Messiah? Of course both. because everything is tied together. So if we're not experiencing the light of Messiah, it's the same. You spend time not reading his word. You spend time, you go through days and you forget. You go through a few weeks without Shabbat, without a service, without coming together with like-minded people. And all of a sudden you feel a void in your life. That's because we need light. Now the veil, they're to put up the veil, the curtain. In most translations, or some translations, it says curtain. But if we look back at the word, yes, the word here of paraket can mean a veil or a curtain, but if we look into the uses of the word, it is more of a veil. So there is a veil between the holy place and the Kodesh Kodeshim, the Holy of Holies. That veil eventually, if you've listened to my teaching on the tabernacle, that veil eventually would become about 6 inches thick and would weigh some 300 pounds. Now, there's no way that I can read these verses and look at this word and look at the other uses of this word and come up with a curtain that's 6 inches thick. So what is going on here is that man began to put layers, layer upon layer upon layer, upon this veil, and eventually made it into a curtain. Eventually, at first you could have looked through like a veil with a wedding. You can see the bride, but you're not seeing clearly. It's like you're seeing through a glass dimly, but eventually face to face when that veil is lifted. And so this veil is like that. It was then turned into a curtain, which I see as man-made religion. Religion always wants to make it to where you can't see the truth. If we can put a curtain here, then we can tell people what's behind that curtain. But they won't be able to experience it for themselves. So we can then pervert that which is there, the message of that which is behind that veil. If we turn into a curtain, we can then pervert it into something that can be used for our benefit. And we can eventually use it to control the people, enter in denominational statements, enter in man-made traditions, enter in what Yeshua was dealing with in that day of a people in power who had turned the Word of God, the Torah, into something of bondage, something that he would say, what you have turned the Torah into is something that no one could ever bear. The rules and regulations that you have to spend your lifetime trying to figure. It would be like, laws in the United States, Congress, law after law after law. There's no way to keep up with it all. Eventually, you're going to break something because of this person added this law to this law to this law, and you were just trying to get through life, but yet you broke something that was at first maybe a fence around a law, but then it became so burdensome that there's no way to there's no way to live it out. And so the simplicity. This is why Yeshua said, take my yoke upon you. Learn from me, for I am meek and humble. The word there that he would have used of take my yoke upon you was a synonym in that day for take my Torah, take what I have said upon you. So if living according to his word produces a burden, stress, a feeling of I'll never be able to do this, a feeling of, well, if I don't do it right, he's going to be mad at me. If I don't do it perfectly like somebody else has told me, he's going to be mad and he's not going to like me. Those are all things of a veil being turned into a curtain. But here's the essence of this, that the root word for parakhet is parech, which means cruelty or to break apart. Why is that veil there? Because man is fallen. And it is only the high priest, the one who is dressed in the clothing of Messiah, who is the representative of Messiah, that has to offer an offering for himself prior to going into the Kodesh Kodeshim. It is only he that will see the manifested presence of the Almighty. All others will just have to gaze from a distance. We'll have to see through a glass dimly. That's the cruelty. The cruelty of sin is that it breaks apart the message of his glory. It says that we can see it from a distance, but in our fallen state, no man has seen, and I'm going to put my own quote in here, my own translation. No man has seen the fullness of the Father and lived, because there has to be that veil between us and him. It is only in Messiah that veil becomes thinner. It is in Messiah that even though religion may have turned into a curtain, he turns it back into a veil so that we can see what we can see today, knowing that there is a day coming that we will be freed, we will be released from this body of corruption. And in that day, we will be able to experience the fullness of who he is. There will be no need for the curtain. And that's the message of when it says that the veil was torn from the top to the bottom. Remember, it's the curtain. That 6-inch curtain was torn from the top to the bottom, not the bottom to the top, but the top to the bottom, saying to us that the message of redemption is something that begins in his realm, not in ours. It's not something that we can work to. It's something that he can do in an instant. So we should be today seeing clearer than any generation that's ever lived. We should be seeing clearer than the Hebrews did even, because that veil for that curtain was torn. And in Messiah, we can see. And I know it sounds almost like a contradiction, but Messiah has provided a way for us to enter into as completely as we can in our current state into his presence. As I guess the words of Shaul going around in my head, eye is not seen, ear is not heard, neither has it entered into the heart of mankind the things that he has prepared for us. What is it going to look like in that day when we see totally and completely? I don't know. So it says, again, on the first day of the first month of the second year, the tabernacle was set up. It's taken them a year to do all the work that is there. And I want to turn over to the last part of this and spend the rest of my time here. That it says that he set up the screen and all of everything there. And then verse 33, he erected the courtyard around the tabernacle and the altar and set up the screen for the entrance to the courtyard. At this point in time, the chapter could have ended. Think about it. Okay, they've done it. They've done all that Moses commanded them to do. They set it up, they erected the courtyard around the tabernacle and the altar, set up the screen for the entrance. Okay. End of story. We're done. All that man could do, man did. It even says that in just a few verses earlier, they lit the menorah. They began to burn incense. I mean, there's light in the holy place. There's incense. There's smoke. There's smell coming forth from the tabernacle. What are they expecting? What are they expecting from here? Think about that. I've never thought about that. As they have gone through this process, as many times as I've talked about the tabernacle, probably taught on it over 100 times, I've never thought about that they probably expected that the chapter is going to end right there. Okay, we've done it. And the truth is, they had done all that man could do. And there's a clue to us there in that there are 6 implements. Some people call it pieces of furniture. I think that's kind of strange, but there's 6 implements in the tabernacle. The altar, the brazen laver, the table of showbread, the menorah, the altar of incense, the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, it's working. It's working. We can offer an animal on the altar. We can bake the showbread, put water in the basin. We can light the menorah, and the priest can can put the incense. Everything. It's all good. All good. But it's the number 6, which is the number of man. All that man can do. But then we enter into this concept that was taught by Dick Reuben many years ago that was so impacting for my life. When Dick Reuben said, "When the pattern is right, the glory will fall." I was asked this question just the other day about the pattern. Why aren't we seeing? Why aren't we seeing in our day the things that Kepha saw, the things that the disciples saw? Why aren't we seeing the book of Acts again? I guess the pattern's not quite right, or maybe it's something different. Maybe it's the timing is not quite right. I don't know, because see, all we can do is all we can do. The truth is, we can't do more than what he asks us to do. Nor should we try to do. I mean, we should try to do all that he asks us to do and do it with everything we have, but then not feel guilty for what we can't do. I can only do what I can do. I can try to pattern by what he has told me the pattern is. So in 6 days you work, and on the 7th day you rest. That's the pattern. You're to eat this and not eat that. That's the pattern. You're to observe the festivals. That's the pattern. But the pattern is that in our observance of all of those things, it should be a picture of Messiah, not a picture of mankind. Maybe I don't know, maybe it's where we're lacking in some ways. But when the pattern is right, the glory will fall, which basically says this: when you give the Father, when we have, let me figure out how to express this. When we have done all that we can do, he shows up. It's kind of like a child. You tell a child to go out in the yard and do some weed eating or mowing or do whatever it is. And because you understand your purpose as a parent, is not to hover over them, but is to work yourself out of a job. And so in parenting, if we tell our child to do something after giving them instructions of how to do it, we should then give them the authority to do and sit back inside and watch. But then when they do that job, we go out and reward them, compliment them. Our presence then comes into, because we're so proud, we got to go there, okay? When your child does something, watching rocket attacks this morning, when your child does something and it's what you wanted them to do, and you're so proud of them, your typical response is to show up. And that's what he did. It says, then the cloud covered the tent of meeting. The glory of Yudhe-Vavhe filled the tabernacle. Moshe was unable to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud remained on it, and the glory of Yudhe-Vavhe filled the tabernacle. Those are some of the most amazing words that there are in all of Scripture. That when they had done all that they could do, he then entered into, which was the seventh, could we say, implement in the tabernacle, was his presence. It is that seventh aspect which made the tabernacle complete. And the same is true with our lives. God willing, I'll never forget the day that this man over my right shoulder, I met him in the foyer at Mountain View Nazarene Church, and he said, Brother Mike, I've been up all night praying for you. Meet me at the altar today. I'll never forget that morning as his presence came into my life. It's beyond words. I feel that there's so many people, maybe you're one of them, I don't know, that you're striving to do all that you can do, and I applaud you for that. But there comes a time in which, if you've done all that you can do and you still feel like you're just kind of going through the motions and you feel a little empty, maybe it's because you haven't received that last part of your tabernacle, and that is his presence entering into it. And maybe on this Shabbat, and coming up on this Shabbat, whenever you're listening to me, maybe that should be your prayer. Spend some time by yourself. Father, if there's anything that I haven't done, please show it to me. If there's things that I've added to, please show it to me. If there's things that I'm doing and shouldn't be, please reveal that to me. Father, in this day, it's your presence. It's your presence that brings it all to life. And then it says that as the cloud moved, the pillar of fire moved, they moved. My last question. Are we in this day moving with his cloud? Do we even know where his cloud is? If darkness is coming, as Josh said, if darkness is coming on the earth today and the light is being shown, yeah, I know we can't all just get up and move to Israel. I mean, you can go visit, but you're not going to be able to stay too long. But it's not just about our physical being moving. It's that our spiritual being. See, our spiritual being is what directs our physical being. I said this past weekend, what you long for is what you will focus on. May we long for the day of the temple and the one who will be in it manifested upon this earth. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Have a blessed, prosperous week. Bezrat Hashem, God willing. See you again next week. Until then, be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך. יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום.